Hi, and welcome to today's SME Business Podcast. Your host, Mark, will be joining you to interview a founder of an SME business each week, highlighting lessons learned and revealing insights. Listen and learn each week on how to get and stay ahead.
Hi, dear listeners. Thank you for tuning in for the next episode of the SME Business Podcast. Today, we're joined by Veena Jetti from Five Funds. Five Funds is a US-based multifamily investment firm, and they help families optimize their investments by providing unique opportunities for passive investors. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
And just to kick it off, can you tell me a bit more about yourself and so the listeners know more about you and how you got into entrepreneurship?
Yes, so I am the founder of, like you said, Five Funds, and we do multifamily investments. And what that means is I bring together opportunities for passive investors to be able to have a hands-off investment experience into US-based assets. And the way I really got started in this is my mom has always been a real estate entrepreneur. And so I really learned from her, and I grew up kind of in the entrepreneurial world and the real estate investing.
Yeah, so basically the entrepreneurial blood, if you will, runs in the family, obviously.
Yes, it would be fair to say that.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And then, of course, already having the background in real estate helps, of course, then helping families optimize their investments. So yeah, that makes sense. Um, so I was wondering as well, so why did you start Five Funds?
Yeah, so when I first graduated from college, I went out into the workforce and I worked for other people, made a lot of money for other people, and realized that I could have more impact and I could have more say in what my business did and what I was associated with. And I could be more impactful in general in ways that I wanted to see. And so the only way for me to really do that was to go out on my own and start my own business. And so I made the leap of faith, and the rest is history from there.
Yeah, and it is a leap of faith, of course, but I think a lot of us will be going like at one point go like, oh yeah, this employment, it works for us, but for me, it's like, okay, now is the time to jump, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And then, like you just have to run with it. Um, and then right now, it's one of those things where um, I think it's even more so that people that had a, let's say, belief that employment was a security blanket, if you will, now feel like, okay, actually, like maybe I should take the jump now, because it's proven that there's not that much added security, if you will, being employed. So you might as well work on your own dream. Um, so I was wondering as well with Five Funds, what's your current investment criteria?
Yeah, so our strategy changes as the market cycle changes. So in the US, we typically go through 7-year up and 7-year down cycles. We've been in a very interesting long bull run. And so as of right now, our general criteria is large, over 100 units, preferably over 200 units in any one asset, in our target markets, which as of right now are Texas, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. And we look for what we call Class B assets. So that means any asset where we can go in, we can add value. Maybe it's built in the late 1980s or early 1990s. So it's a little bit outdated, could use some touching up, a facelift, if you will. And so we go in and we perform that value add component and bring it up to the market and add the value to the asset and then turn around and sell it.
Yes, yeah, it makes sense. Touch it up so you can get better rents, or if not renting out, sell it on. Which is I know, yeah, other people doing that at a smaller scale, of course.
Yes, and it's exactly like what you would see on these TV shows, like fix or flip shows or HGTV. It's a similar concept, except we do it on a very large scale. So instead of doing one house at a time, I'm doing 200 units at a time.
Yeah, and then this is where the passive element also comes in, because the active element, as in like actually redoing it myself, for instance, and I know I'm not going to be the only one. I would probably be really bad at that.
Yeah, it's definitely hard.
DIY wise, like yeah, you don't want to do that yourself unless you're I don't know, worked on American Makeover, was it? The TV show. I used to love that one with Ty Pennington, was it?
Yes, I think so.
I don't know that one. Sorry, personal note there, but yeah, that was like one of my favorite shows. And
Yeah.
like they would go like found this family that really needed it, and they end up with like this massive house, and then go like, well, wow, there's a nice house, but then you also go like, wow, there's a lot of land. Because especially in the UK, you'll be like, wow, I don't know, I actually don't know people with that amount of land.
Yeah, the US is very spread out and not quite as densely populated as other places in the world. So for us, we get a lot more land out here. And, we don't have multi-generational living to the same extent that, Europe does or that Asia does. And so what we often see is, when you're 18, 19, 20 years old, you go out into the world, you rent an apartment. Oftentimes those will be our types of tenants. And they'll live there for a few years, save up. And it used to be that buying a home in America was kind of part of the American dream, but we're seeing statistically that's changing. People are waiting till later and later to buy houses, if at all. And so we still see a lot of rental. We just don't necessarily see, someone living with their parents necessarily. And I say that, but now knowing that COVID has been happening, I think we're seeing that more. But certainly not to the extent that other nations in the world see it.
No, and it is like I said, the homeowner dream, in a way is still more alive, but yeah, and more people are renting as well, because also employment, changes, as in people move around the states, or even like move around the world, and then you're not always in a market necessarily where then you can easily rent it out. So yeah, that's the thing as well.
Yeah, and that's why we actually are very careful when we select our markets, because we want to make sure they're markets that are growing, that there are renters that can pay their rent. And we're seeing areas like New York City, for example, where they're losing population because it's cold, it's expensive.
Yes.
Taxes are high, and now people are realizing, hey, we can work from anywhere. We don't have to be stuck to any one city.
Yeah, that is funny you mentioned this, because that's the thing I saw as well. I don't know if you were going to mention it, but I was going to mention it anyway. Is that a lot of people like moving from California to Texas.
Yep.
And then I see with my American acquaintances, like a lot of people go like, oh yeah, but like don't bring the Texas with us. That kind of thing. That's a like a difficult challenge, of course, where.
Yeah, so I live in Texas actually, and so and I did live in California at once. So I have experience with both states, and they do say that don't California my Texas, and really like the colloquialism behind that is more Texas is known to be a very conservative red state, Republican state, whereas California is the polar opposite. And California has, in the real estate market, as far as real estate goes, one thing that's interesting about looking at the two different states is cost of living is very high in California compared to Texas. And what we see just from like the political influences as well is in California, certain areas have rent control, which obviously as a landlord, that impacts us very greatly. As a tenant, it makes sense because, well, rent can be quite unaffordable otherwise. And so, that's really what the sentiment is. And we tend to stay away from areas like California as on an investment criteria basis, just because it's very tough to have stability, and our investments call for a lower level of risk comparatively to other portfolios.
Yeah, because I can imagine, like Texas and Florida and such, it is easier to sell an asset on, because the market is more friendly, if you will. I'm not pretending to be a real estate expert, by the way, but don't anybody listening to this podcast, please don't see this as investment advice. uh, uh, before somebody
What
sues
suits
me.
me?
I was
I
gonna
was gonna
say,
say,
what was wondering as well, like what are the current underwriting trends you're seeing?
Yeah, so we have made a lot of adjustments based on COVID being, prevalent everywhere, especially in the US. You might know we've not really done a great job of handling or containing the pandemic. And so on our end, we've made some ultra conservative changes to our underwriting. And namely, one of them would be previous to COVID, we might have gone in underwriting for rent increases to happen day one when we take over a property. Our last project we did end of October, we closed an $80 million deal in Atlanta, Georgia, and we underwrote it with zero rent increases for the first 12 months. And so we started becoming a lot more conservative on what we're able to do, because the reality of the matter is until there's a vaccine that's widely available, we don't know if there's going to be another spike. Currently, we're seeing increasing numbers and increasing deaths in the US. And so we're just being cognizant of that. And we're trying to make sure that if there's some kind of change or sudden movement in the market, we're able to withstand that downturn and weather that storm.
Yeah, that makes sense because yeah, like you said, vaccines have to get out. Max vaccination has to happen as well. Um, before the market, if you will, stabilizes, and then people can say, hey, you know what, I'm gonna move, and I can sustain a higher rent than I was paying before, that kind of thing. Because in the end, it's in the entire system, and then yeah, I think that's the whole. From a treasury point of view, a lot of people might be surprised how fragile or how dependent each part of the economy is on the
on
other
the other
parts.
parts.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah, and that's it. That's a really good point. And what we do in terms of having renters in our units, they have to continue to maintain jobs, and if they get sick or catch COVID and they're out for 2 weeks, how does that affect them from being able to pay their rent? And it's an interesting challenge for us as landlords, because we are trying to balance the human side of, okay, there's somebody who's struggling and we want to make sure that we're doing what we can to assist, but then there's the business side which doesn't always align, in that we need to deliver for our investors. And so it's been kind of walking that fine balance and that fine line.
yeah, I can imagine. I was gonna say like it's too late for that, but like for something in the future where I know like there's a lot of like insurance capable possibilities. Um, like underwrite it, quote unquote, that way where like okay, you can insure your risk for something
Something
like
like
that.
that.
So what's interesting is we have tons of insurance on
Yeah.
everything because our lenders require it.
Yes.
What's interesting in the US is every single policy specifically excludes pandemics.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so
Yes.
none of our insurance policies actually cover a pandemic. And we have looked into pandemic insurance, and it is so cost prohibitive.
Yes.
The amount it would cost on to like bet on something so small like this,
Yes.
it's really, really, really difficult to justify. Whereas, we have a liability policy, because if someone slips and falls, that's a likely occurrence on any one of our assets.
Yes. Yeah, and this is the funny part as well, is that with the insurance bit as well. I know that in the UK, I don't know about the US, but a lot of insurance are actually would try to get out of paying out, but that was actually based on a different clause. So what they were trying to do, they had business interruption insurance,
Insurance.
Uh-huh.
and then the government said, yeah, you have to shut down and work from home. And of course, if you had a retail front end, if you will,
You can't do that, right?
you can't really do that. So basically, a lot of people are still in the process. And then basically, a few weeks ago, finally, some judge said they should pay out, but then basically the insurance are still trying to hold fire, if you will. So that's interesting because, like you said, you some might think like, okay, like a business interruption insurance or such. But even there, an insurance will always find a way to try not to have to pay out. Um, and that's the thing, with the pandemic insurance. Yeah, it's probably more effective and to I don't know, put it away and then actually grow it as investment to be like, hey, you know what, for the once in 100 years, hopefully, kind of
Right.
thing. We just put it away, and then if we do need it, then if we put away X amount and we put away for 100 years, that should get us through, the pandemic, um, which is almost like a new, I don't know, investment product almost.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see what people come up with.
Yes, yes. And again, no financial advice there.
Correct.
Um,
No financial advice.
yes, exactly. I know about cybersecurity, nothing about that kind of thing.
I'm
I was
not
gonna
licensed to give anybody advice, so you should always
No,
go
no,
back to
exactly.
your tax, your lawyers, all of your people, because we are not qualified.
Yes, exactly. I was wondering as well. So, what advice would you give to high income earners looking to invest in real estate?
Yeah, so I think that the first thing to do is to get with your financial advisors and your CPAs and see if it's the right opportunity for you and if having this as part of your entire portfolio balance makes sense. And then deciding if yes, what does that look like? What amount is that? Is that $50,000, $5 million, 500,000? It's going to be different for everybody. And so you want to look at what is correct for you and your specific situation. And then I think the next thing would be to reach out to different sponsors or investment companies like mine who have opportunities that kind of fall within your risk tolerance and your strategy. And once you do that, then you'll be able to see if there's a good fit for you and wait for an opportunity. Be patient. Good operators, like, we don't do a deal just to do a deal. We only do a deal that we're willing to put our name on. And so if you see a deal that you like, you can move forward with confidence because you've already done your homework ahead of time. And if it doesn't feel right, then just wait. You don't need to do it just for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's one of those things, especially the more money involved, you don't want to, um, under pressure feel like, I need to do the deal now, because there will always be other things,
Exactly.
potential to do, and it's one thing like, potentially missing out on a bit of, increasing capital, if you will, investment capital, because you choose a deal, but it's very much harder to come back from a potential deal where you didn't do the due diligence and you end up losing, I don't know, like 50%.
Exactly.
That's much harder.
Exactly. You want to definitely do your due diligence. So you can go into any investment with confidence. And
Yes.
I always tell my investors, if you can't explain the deal back to me, then I've done a poor job of explaining to you, and you probably shouldn't invest in it. But if you can explain it back to me, then I feel much more comfortable.
Yes, exactly. So I was wondering as well, so what should a new investor ask from a deal sponsor?
Yeah, so the first question I always like to ask any deal sponsor is about their background and their strategy. So, find out what they're doing, what they're looking to do. I like to understand what their risk tolerance is, because sometimes you'll have people that are very aggressive because their investors and their portfolios require a 50% return over 2 years. Whereas my deals are just not that aggressive. And so I don't really go after those high yield opportunities, but I go after the more solid. I always like to say it's not, in like baseball terms, I'm not trying to hit a home run every time. What I'm trying to do is hit like a solid double and be very consistent and stable across my opportunities. So I think those are like good places to start. And then ask every question that you have of your sponsor. It doesn't matter if it seems like a silly question, because I always tell investors this is like learning a brand new language sometimes. And so if you don't know something, there's no stupid questions. The only stupid questions are the ones that don't get asked. So always ask, and someone like me is going to be happy to help answer those.
Yeah, listen to the experts. I know that's a controversial thing right now to say.
Yeah, well,
But a
I
lot
was
of
gonna
people
say.
will say no. But yeah, I'm still old school maybe.
Yeah, no, I think that that's absolutely true, though. I think
Yeah.
that that's the best way to get good information is listen to experts, see how they're investing their money. I invest into all of my own deals because I believe in them.
Yeah, no, again, that should tell you already, investing in the deals you're offering. Um, and it is interesting, and it's pretty safe because of course everybody needs a place to live.
I mean, so I hate to use the word safe when I'm talking about investments because it's still an investment, right? There's always risk in any
Of course,
investment
yes.
that you do, but
Yeah.
it's relatively safe compared to, like right now, office space is really hurting pretty badly.
I was going to say, and retail and malls and whatever.
Yep, malls, they're hurting really badly. And they were
Yeah.
hurting before COVID. So, areas like that are definitely higher risk. But that's, again, it's a risk-adjusted return. So if you're investing into multifamily, the reason I like it is for the exact reason you said. People will always need a place to live.
Yes. And then, for malls it's different, although I know that there's investors working on turning those into apartments. Although, to be fair, I saw one example recently. I was like, it was actually giving me a prison feeling. I was like, yes, you had like little trees, like to ornamental, decoration, that kind of thing. But it still was like giving too much of a prison vibe.
Yeah, no, that's not good. You don't want home to feel like prison.
Yes, I know, and I get it. Like those galleries, if you then literally turn those shops into homes, it can quickly feel like a prison.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. So we don't do quite that extensive.
No. I get that, but it was more like if you're talking about multifamily homes and such, it's a more traditional investment than trying to turn malls into living complexes.
Exactly. But we are seeing that, we're seeing a lot of hotel conversions. So we're seeing hotels being converted often now. And I think that those things are interesting because it just shows how entrepreneurs think, right? And I think that's the most interesting piece of it, is because they're always looking for a way to be innovative and think outside the box and be creative and find opportunities where other people don't.
Yes. And the whole definition of entrepreneurship.
Exactly.
That's the quote. I was going to say, with hotels is interesting as well because you have, especially if you have a lot of rooms, you simply to simplify things, you bring a few rooms together. They already have interconnecting rooms, most of them anyway.
Right.
So it's relatively low cost, quote unquote, to turn around.
Exactly.
Because you're turning living space into more living space. So you're not having to think like, okay, I need to change drainage and such because in effect,
the plumbing's already there. It's a fairly easy change. It's
which
easier
I'm
than
still not
changing a
going to do
mall.
myself because I would still be able to find two left hands. Anyway.
Well, it's easier than changing a mall into a multifamily.
Yes, that's a whole other challenge.
Yes.
Although you can do like something with high ceilings, which is like an aesthetic that I would like. Like one day I'll have something like that. Um, um, I was wondering as well, what do you think governments around the world could do better to help small businesses grow?
Yeah, I think right now it's more a matter of funding, even just the everyday person, right? Like it all kind of money moves through the economy, right? So when the U.S. had released their stimulus package, for example, right, they gave most people in the country got $1,200 each. And so a married couple might get $2,400. Well, that probably covers 1 or 2 months of rent for my tenants. And so for me, having that assistance available and having various outreach programs certainly helps. And then, I would say that especially here in the U.S., we could do a whole lot better job of managing this pandemic. I just think it would have the effect of being able to open businesses a little bit sooner and be able to keep businesses thriving. Mark, did I lose you?
I keep myself on mute.
Oh, there you are.
Like
Okay.
repeating myself. This is why we edit. Anyway, short version. Rewind. Okay. Pretending to be cassette tape. I was gonna say. Um, yeah. So that was gonna say the statistic is that 95 to 98% or something of the economy is small and medium enterprise. Um, and I think, to be fair, the US is not alone. The UK, is also dropping some things there. Um, the governments around the world are just focused on like large enterprise, and I get that, like these people, you know, um, employ tens of hundreds of thousands of people, but the majority of the economy is small business. And what really stuck out with me was that I don't have all the details again. But with the payment protection program, I understood that the companies that were actually getting it were actually more towards large enterprise than the actual small businesses that they were supposed to help.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, that program was just rolled out so quickly. I think people weren't really even aware of all the nuances. Even our banks, they didn't really know what was happening. They didn't know when it would roll out. And the money just got spent up so quickly. And it did, to your point, go to a lot of larger enterprises. Like, I think the NBA got like $5 million. One of the teams got like $5 million, which,
yes.
to me as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur, I actually understand it because their revenue is changing and their bottom
Of
line is
course.
changing.
Yes.
But I also think that the intent of the program was not to fund those types of businesses. And I think that it probably could have made more impact if it had funded the business it was intended to, which is the smaller businesses or medium enterprise businesses.
Yeah, and I think, from my personal standpoint, not that everybody agrees with it, is that it's one thing like going into larger business, but one of the things is that I don't know how it works in the US, to be fair, but in the UK, basically, if you're on the high street and you're in a business premises, then you pay business rates tax. Um, so what happened is that when COVID hit, is that all these businesses got business rates relief, and that was across the board. To be clear, there was no exception. Um, so you had like, especially the supermarkets of the world, so the Walmarts of the world, but then the UK versions. Um, they were getting all this business rate relief as well. And actually, it was like one of the few shops that was actually still open. Um, so you had these people paying out dividends to the shareholders because they literally were making more money than they ever made because it literally was one of the few things still open,
Yep.
because it was considered essential.
Yeah, I
But
think here we also saw, I'm just venturing a guess, but I would assume that liquor sales probably went up quite a bit here in the US. And I think our grocery stores have been doing really well. We've seen, Zoom and technology platforms do really
yes,
well. And my husband's actually a physician, and so his practice has actually remained fairly busy, but they're getting ready to, shut down elective surgeries again because
yes.
it's just getting so out of control. So, but we've seen a lot of doctors, surprisingly, like our plastic surgery friends, or our less, as like quote unquote essential, like non-elective
Yes.
specialties. We see them suffering a whole lot more, or their business is down a little
Yes.
bit because people are putting off procedures. So it's kind of interesting to see that happen too, even within healthcare framework.
Yes. Because people go like, is this something that I can do without? I've seen it myself, with cybersecurity, where companies will go like, you're helping us with change projects because right now we are suffering so much, that we can't do anything that involves change. Whether we don't care how critical we think it is, we literally can't afford to do anything that involves change. Um, so I had one client as well that basically instantly stopped, um, 300, well, not, let's say 56 programs of work involving 300 people. They literally instantly stopped all of that end of March. Because one of them, for instance, was depending on them being able to be physically be in a building because they were traders. So they went like, well, actually, literally, we're not making any money right now because there's no trading floor.
Yeah,
So
it's
they went literally
tough.
from, as you can imagine, with an investment management company that's based in the middle of London, you can imagine like how much money they normally would make. Um, so if you go from that to like zero, yeah, that's like it's hard to even visualize. And I think that's where governments around the world should have done a more into normalizing, so more people would care about the neighbors, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Because
Yep.
I saw a lot of like news radio articles where they were focusing on the people that did get help, but then were leaving out the people that didn't. So you get this, people, have this perception where they go like everybody was helping, kind of thing.
No, no, it definitely was not like that
Uh,
here, unfortunately. I wish it were the case.
yes.
But, there are people, even in my neighborhood, that are not able to afford their groceries. I mean, it's really terrible what this pandemic has done. And, unfortunately, I think that the US has just had much larger repercussions from it not being managed. And I think that's partially, in America, the mindset is a little bit different than in Japan, for example, right? Like our society is like very like inwardly focused, and so it's all about personal liberty and personal freedoms.
Yes.
So much so that people refuse to wear a mask out of principle in the US. And I just think that's really unfortunate because something as simple as wearing a mask can literally save someone else's life.
Yeah, and that's a difficult conversation to have every time. Again, like for my American acquaintances and such, I literally have like people on both sides of the spectrum, if you will, where I have like some people going like, I live in the middle of nowhere. Our village is literally 150 people. So why should I wear a mask? That kind of thing. And I get it, like it's a small town, but literally only one person needs to go, for instance, even into a bigger town, come back,
And that's
and then
exposure.
you're done.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And like healthcare isn't very accessible here in the US in general. And then when you start putting strain on hospital systems, it becomes worse and worse and worse. And so areas that have 150 people in the entire town, for example, probably don't have a doctor, let alone multiple.
No. Yeah. So basically, when they would go to their local Walmart, they literally would be like a 90-minute trip, single journey, um, which is like crazy. If you like if I live just outside London, just to give you an idea, and sorry, um, and I don't know if I leave the house and I walk about, I would say 150 meters. I don't know what it is in yards, but basically there's a corner shop. Basically, there's off license because that's a UK thing, as in you can buy liquor there, um, and other stuff. But the off license points to that they are allowed to sell off the license, which is where the name comes from. And a like a local supermarket, which is like so most of the local supermarkets here, even the local ones, are basically from a bigger chain, but it's like a metro version. If that
Sure.
makes sense. Um, so yeah, like having to drive 90 minutes to go to the supermarket is like I don't know.
Yeah, it's
But of course, in the end of like you get a picture and they post a view from like literally from the porch because of course they got a proper porch, and it's like there's mountains there and it's like wow, like literally there's no neighbor in sight. So yeah, like it's one thing or the other.
Yeah, I would say the vast majority of Americans probably don't live in such remote areas. But to
No,
your
yeah,
point,
yeah.
and we kind of touched on this earlier when we were talking that America is pretty spread out and far less dense. So, unless you're in like a major metro like Chicago or New York or LA, you're probably not walking to a store. You're probably still driving to the store, or,
Yes,
if you're me,
yeah.
you're doing Instacart or one of those.
To be fair, like the work I did in America, I went to Vegas because, of course, conferences are in Vegas, that kind of thing. So I can't really say I went there properly because, of course, it's a conference season kind of thing. And I went to Texas as well at one point, funny enough. I went to Austin and I went to Houston because on my wife's side, she has grandparents living in Houston. And I like Austin, and I went to of all places, Taylor, Texas.
Oh, wow. That's like
Because
very small.
yes, the reason for that is that because I got this, like, like show me like all the barbecue restaurants, and basically there's a I think it was like Franklin's, which if people are not don't know, it's like it's a famous restaurant or whatever. Um, yeah, so I ended up like we drove to like Franklin's in Taylor, Texas, and like in an and I it was like like this is like a movie set, and then like they were like, yeah, well actually they actually used it for Transformers movie. So they way basically instead of like going to like a Warner Brothers movie studio, or I don't even know who owns Transformers, to be fair. Um, they were literally like like this is such a stereotypical small town. So then I don't know who does that, but basically the location scout went like, you know what, we should shoot here. So I was like joking, like, like they should shoot a movie here. It's like, well, actually they done that.
They are, yeah.
And I literally like was like eating barbecue in this like converted barn thing. It's like it couldn't be more authentic. So I really liked that. But yeah, the fast open spaces, everything was by car. The
Yes.
funny time is like I was there around Christmas time, and it was just such a shock that I was like walking around in Austin at Christmas time in my shorts.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm like,
Texas is
we
pretty
don't really
warm.
get snow here, but being able to walk around with 26 degrees Celsius, I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit.
Yeah, it's
That
probably in the
was,
50s, 60s.
it was like, okay, I'm walking around my shorts. It's
Yeah.
like weird, yeah, like a Santa in shorts, that kind of thing.
But that's unique to the southern states, really.
So I do like it, and I still need to go to Florida, and I have kids, so I need to go to Disney World, but I'll get there at one point after
One
COVID.
day, yeah, one day Disney
One
will
day,
be back
exactly.
open.
So for the entrepreneurs listening that got the great idea but haven't started, so if a budding entrepreneur would ask you for one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think it would be to not be paralyzed by fear. I think we don't really talk about this enough. And so today I have over $400 million in my portfolio, my investment portfolio. And I started at zero, and you will too. But if you just don't let that fear of literally leaping off the edge of a cliff scare you, I think that there's a whole lot of potential, and I think that that is the best time to really move forward with your vision and be ready to pivot. I know a lot of business owners, my family's businesses included, when COVID hit, we were all making some pretty quick pivots, and we were changing our models, and we were going to a very heavily tech model previous to before something like COVID. And there's always going to be something new, whether it's COVID or something else. You just need to be prepared to pivot, but don't let that fear stop you from moving forward.
Yeah, completely makes sense. But the pivot, it's one thing. Um, it's so important, and also just in it was like last crisis in 2008. It also ended up a lot of new companies that got started that are now major players. Um, so yeah, there is grief, if you will, but there's also opportunity, and I think you say with the fear, like a lot of people overestimate how much of an impact it is if you fail, and then in the end it's like, yes, you might fail, but then you can start again and then learn from the previous failure, and then you can be better off. But if you wait for the perfect time, then yeah, you can wait forever, that kind of thing. Um, so a bit of a fun question. If you had a magic wand, what would you want to make happen?
Oh gosh, I feel like I have so many wishes, but really the most like core value to me is that my family, I've twin toddler daughters, that they and like my parents and sister and husband are all taken care of and live just like a happy life.
That's a good thing, and in the end, it's all about family. We do it all for family, and then as long as they're happy, then we're happy, that kind of thing. Um, um, so of course, for the listeners, where can people find you and Five Funds?
Yeah, you can find me on my website, vivefunds.com, VIVEFUNDS.com. And there we have an investor portal. So if you want to see what we're offering, you're welcome to sign up there. Or if you want to set up a call to discuss more and learn a little bit more about what we're doing, you can sign up there as well.
Yeah, I was just like, of course, I check out the website before. I was like, I was looking at there's an active offering that was like, oh, that looks nice. I want to live there. Um,
Well,
but then,
that offering, I'm actually getting ready to close that. We've already
okay,
closed
okay.
it. But yes, that was our most recent deal. And to
Yeah,
your point, there's a lot of space there,
yes.
like we were talking about earlier.
Oh wow, it's like yeah, you don't get that kind of space here in this side of
Exactly.
the pond, if you will.
Exactly true.
Yeah, so thank you for your time. I
Absolutely.
hope you had fun. And for the listeners, wherever you are on a surfboard, in the Atlantic Ocean, or on a tropical island, or North Pole, on the space station. If you're on a space station, do let me know, because my daughter would like to be an astronaut. So shout outs are always cool, and then I can mention it in publications. Of course, it'd be like, I got a listener in the International Space Station. Um, and I'll talk to you all on the next recording. Thank you.
You.
Thank you for tuning in this episode. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I look forward to having you tune in again next episode. See you next time.